My husband steals my credit card and goes on a trip with his mistress. I used all your money on my girlfriend, lol. Me. Oh, that's okay. It's not mine anyway. Do you recognize this card? I gasped when I saw what my husband had in his hand. He was clutching the credit card he had stolen from my wallet, and he wasn't even trying to hide it from me. Now you are no longer of any use to me. I used the maximum limit of $30,000 for my beloved girlfriend. I see. What's the matter? So surprised you can't speak? Oh, and in case you're wondering, marital theft is not a crime. So I'm sorry to rain on your parade here, but suing me won't do you any good. I decided to show one last act of kindness by telling such a scumbag husband the truth of that credit card. This is the story of how I got one step ahead of my husband's admittedly well-thought-out plan to boost the limit of my credit card to go on a trip of adultery with another woman. And if I'm going to be honest, you'll want to stick around until the end to find exactly what I did, because it's pretty genius, lol. My name is Ingrid, and I'm a 35-year-old office woman working in sales for a local business. The company I've worked for since I graduated from college recognized my effort, and coupled with how I'd contributed to the growth of the business's sales, I was thankfully promoted to department manager 2 years ago. I was honestly very proud of myself, but during my congratulatory party, I was kind of forced to make a spontaneous speech, and although I was intoxicated just a little bit, I never forgot to thank all of my colleagues for their support throughout the years. When you become a functioning member of society, working for a growing local business, one thing becomes very clear. One individual only becomes something more than themselves because of the support of others. Sure, there are those rare cases where the lone wolf works tirelessly to achieve success, but with other people you learn so much more, and thanks to that additional knowledge, you grow so much faster as a business person and a person in general. I emphasized all of this quite strongly during my speech, and I ended it by saying thank you. Since my promotion, I was busier than ever, but I still learned so much since when I was but a saleswoman, and every day was fulfilling. When I got promoted, I had a husband of 4 years named Roland. Because we both worked and I was still enjoying my job, we didn't have children, or rather not yet, and we used to live just the two of us in a nice condo near my workplace. I initially met my husband 20 years ago, when he and I were classmates in high school. But at the time, we were just classmates, and although we had talked a few times, we were never really conscious of each other as potential partners. When we were both 30 years old, however, we met again at our first class reunion in a long time, and from there, we quickly grew very close. The messaging was quite electric, and one fateful day, he invited me to watch the premiere of a new action movie we were both excited about. After a fantastic first date together, we went on more, and then we eventually an official couple. A year later, we got married. And Roland is a good husband by all means. However, once we got married, there was something about him that made me think a little differently in a negative way. He worked as a security guard, and to be quite frank, his salary is obviously quite a bit lower than mine. And perhaps he was all too aware of that. He was extremely stingy, needlessly stingy. It wouldn't be much of an exaggeration to say that his hobby is saving money, and he did so on a daily basis. All living expenses come out of Roland's pocket, but he pushed to make it all as minimal as possible. Unplug the plugs you don't use, do the laundry using the leftover bathwater, and other things like that. While I do understand that economizing is important, the way he did it made it a very big drag. He was so nagging that I once told him that I would pay for our living expenses if this kept up, but his pride wouldn't allow it, and he never accepted my offer. As the days turn into months, and the months turn into years, as his wife, Roland's nagging was a huge pain in the ass, and it had eventually become a daily source of psychological stress. In addition, I didn't know if we were so strapped for cash, but my husband has been working overtime more and more lately. My own salary was quite decent even before my promotion, and when I became department manager, give me 6 months, and I could buy a new car. Nothing like a sports car or anything extravagant like that, but a brand new station wagon? Doable. Anyway, back to Roland. Because of his extra working hours, he would immediately retire to his room once he got home. Perhaps it was because he was tired. I don't know. One thing was clear, though. Our conversation time as a married couple became shorter and shorter. Then one day, Roland came home unusually early and asked me about something. "So Ingrid, how about a car, eh?" I was surprised at the abruptness of his suggestion, but it was true. We had talked about buying a car eventually, thinking about the future, when we had a child. But we hadn't really talked about having children yet, and I thought it was too soon to start now, so I answered. "But it's not inconvenient yet, is it? We're not even thinking about having kids yet, Roland. I don't think we'd have a problem if we didn't have a car right now." Then he told me something else. "I met a guy at work who's acquainted with someone that sells used cars privately. I told him I was thinking of buying a car at some point, and he said the salesman could give me a discount if he introduced me." I didn't have any particular knowledge or interest in any brand or model of car. However, I immediately thought it would be a good deal if we could buy it at a discount. "I see. That's actually a good deal. I don't know much about car models and such, so you go ahead, pick one that you recommend," I said, and Roland answered happily, "Oh, okay, awesome, thanks." Then, after a short pause, he continued rather quietly, "So, about the payment. Can we pay with your credit card for the time being?" "What?" Before you question my response, let me tell you that I thought he was going to pay for it. Think about it. I explained how he had been economizing so much money, to the point it was borderline insanity, and there must have been some motive for that unless it really was a form of insanity. I thought that his nagging and stinginess were all because he was saving up for this kind of thing. But at that time, when I thought more about it, it was obvious that despite saving up so much, it was hard to believe he had enough money to buy a nice used car, since even the daily living expenses seemed to be making him tight with money. I understand. That line of reasoning seemed logical in retrospect, and in the end, I agreed to go along with his proposal. However, there was one thing that bothered me, and I asked him about it. "I thought you couldn't use a credit card at any car shop." Then Roland slapped his forehead as though he'd just remembered something important. Right, I forgot about that. But I did check that with my colleague at work, and he said that because it's a privately owned car dealership, you can use credit cards there." "I see. Yep, thank God for that, huh, LOL. So all that's left for you to do is to just raise the limit up to the maximum next month. Was it $30,000? I think that's enough for a good car, don't you think?" "Yeah, I agree. All right then, I'll up the limit tomorrow afternoon during my lunch break." And so, we ended up agreeing to buy a car. The next day, I kept my promise and called my credit card agency during my lunch break and asked them to raise my credit limit to $30,000 for the next month. Even though I stood by my original thoughts that it wouldn't be particularly inconvenient even if we didn't get a car now, I was looking forward to the purchase of the car, as it would give me a wider range of activities to do outside the house on my days off, and I would be able to go on errands while saving time. When Roland came home that night, he immediately asked me, "Did you up the credit limit, honey?" "Yup, it was no problem. It's set at $30,000, as we agreed." "Wonderful. I'll borrow the card when I make the payment." I immediately halted the conversation and asked to backtrack a bit. That sure came out of the blue. "Hold on a second. The card is in my name, so I'll go with you to make the payment." Then Roland scratched his head with an expression of exasperation and said, "Oh no, you see, I'm going to be with that colleague I told you about, and it's going to be awkward, you know? You, me, him in his car. Yeah, oof, that can't be pleasant for any of us. It's going to okay." "That's not the point, Roland. I'm just saying that legally speaking, only the card holder can use their credit card. You're going to need a PIN number or a signature or something like that." "Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. The PIN number for your card is your birth date or the date of our wedding anniversary, right?" "Yeah, but then it'll all go well. Trust me on this. We don't even need a signature. It's a private company, so they're a little lax on that, you know." Anyone would feel the same. A credit card that had just been bumped up to an expenditure limit of 30 grand, and that card is going to be out of your possession into that of a completely different person, and they also have knowledge of the PIN number. I'm pretty sure that anyone but Shaq would be pretty damn nervous about such a situation happening to them, and I was no millionaire tycoon. Roland was my husband, and I did want to trust him, but given the nature of the situation, I don't anyone can be too careful. As I was silently wondering how to persuade him to get me to pay it myself, he opened his mouth in a tedious manner. Okay, forget it. Forget it, meaning I can go with you to make the payment? Yeah. I'll let you know when I have more details. He replied appropriately and disappeared into the bathroom. Well, I had never met anyone from my husband's office, so I guess it was understandable that it would be awkward for all of us. But like I said, my credit card, 30 grand, someone else, PIN number, it was all too shady. And that uneasiness was justified all too well the following week, when it was confirmed that distrusting Roland was perhaps the best decision I'd ever made. That evening I was eating out at a tavern with some of my juniors from work. I say subordinates, but from my perspective, they were all my mentors. They were the ones that especially helped me out and put me on the path to becoming department manager. We were eating in a private room of the tavern, and the whole place had a nice atmosphere, and we were enjoying a nice meal and drinks for a while. After an hour, I got up to use the restroom. When I closed the door of our private room to put on my shoes, the voices of my colleagues became muffled, and I began to hear a couple of voices murmuring from the adjacent private room. I was startled, because within the first seconds of hearing what sounded like two voices, one male and one female, I recognized the male voice. It definitely belonged to Roland. It was unusual for him, who was usually so stingy, to be out drinking. If the fact that he was out drinking and dining at all wasn't astonishing enough, he was doing so alone with another woman. That made me even more astonished, and that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came from what Roland said next. I got my wife to raise the limit on the credit card so we can go on a trip with you, Rhonda. Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you, Roland, darling. But is it possible to use a credit card in your wife's name? As long as it doesn't require her signature to make the payments, it'll be fine. I've narrowed it down to 2 PIN numbers, so from there onward, it's a piece of cake. I nearly keeled over. My mind went blank for a moment. Before I could think, my hand wandered by itself, brought out my phone, and hit the record button. No need to worry then. How much can we spend? 30 grand. 30 grand? Oh man, we can get a suite room. For real. Loyal, pick any hotel you want, darling lol. When's the date? About that, Ingrid has to work on her day off the week after next. That's when we should go, I think. I'll search for a hotel right away then. All I could do was stand there in a daze. There was no way I was going to enjoy the rest of the party, so I lied and said I wasn't feeling well and left early, leaving enough money to pay for the whole night. We'd all agreed it was my treat, after all. On the way home, I was all alone, and with my head cooling down by the nice, pleasant evening breeze, I replayed the freshly recorded video and tried desperately to understand what was happening. So is that why you made me raise the limit on my credit card, Roland? Is that why you pestered me to lend you the card? Is that why you lied about the whole car thing in the first place? I no longer knew where to begin to suspect him of foul play. If I knew one thing, it was this. I was going to take revenge on Roland for having an affair, and I was going to divorce him. Even if I didn't lend him my credit card, he will undoubtedly steal it from my wallet and go that trip of adultery with his sweet Rhonda. I decided to take advantage of his predictable behavior and put him through hell. Buckle up, folks. This the beginning of when things get good. The next day, I started preparing to exact vengeance on Roland. He had no idea that I knew he was planning to cheat on me, much less that I was planning to retaliate against him in the most brutal way possible. When he came home from work every day since that night, he was humming a joyful tune, smelling flowers and feeling clouds up there, no doubt. He was in paradise. He asked me, "Remind me, were you supposed to work on your day off the weekend after next? Or was that my mistake?" I thought to myself that he had finally made his move, but I gulped down my natural reaction of erupting in anger because I knew everything he was plotting, and did my best to keep it from showing on my face. "Yes, I am working then. Why do you ask?" He answered, his cheeks slackening. "You know that colleague of mine who introduced me to the car dealership? I'm actually going on a trip with him." "Oh, really?" "Yep. So I'll be gone next Saturday and Sunday, and I guess I'll be back Sunday night." "Ah, I see. Have fun then." I even felt disgust towards Roland's happy face as he smiled at me, but I tried my best to smile back, thinking that I only had a few more days left to spend in the same space with this scumbag. From then on, every day went by so fast, and before I realized how much time had passed, it was already Saturday. Roland usually slept until noon on holidays, but on this particular day, he was up early in the morning, rushing around and packing for his trip. I just went about my morning as usual, making sure I kept up the charade that I pretended not to know what was going on. I went to work as usual. As soon as I left home for work, I opened my wallet and sure enough, the credit card was gone. I nodded my head and quickly made up my mind to accelerate the plans to plunge him into hell. When I came home that day, I hurriedly began to pack my belongings. I packed a suitcase with the bare minimum of valuables, clothes, and other personal belongings. The next day, I finished work, went home, ate, took a bath, and waited for Roland's final return, staring at the half-filled green pieces of paper with a large smile on my face. I really don't know how much time passed since I sat down on the sofa and stared at the documents, but I eventually heard the sound of the second hand ticking away in the quiet living room and looked up to see that the time was approaching 9 p.m. Just then, I heard a clatter at the front door. I quickly hid the paper in an envelope, slipped it under the couch cushions, and started sipping a cup of iced barley tea to cover my thirst as I opened my Kindle and started reading something. A good cover-up act, I thought. "I'm home!" Roland strode into the living room, rattling his big suitcase against the wall by accident. I gasped when I saw what my husband had in his hand. He was clutching the credit card he had stolen from my wallet, and he wasn't even trying to hide it from me. When he saw my shocked expression, his own face lit up and he said, "Do you recognize this card?" And then he plopped the card down in front of me with a smug look on his face. "Now you are no longer of any use to me. I'm going to be with a new woman from now on. Oh, and in case you're wondering, marital theft is not a crime, so I'm sorry to rain on your parade here, but suing me won't do you any good." I had not expected such a quick and direct declaration of war from the enemy, but it saved me the trouble of interrogating him about the recording I'd obtained that evening. I slowly opened my mouth. "How much did you spend?" Roland plopped his stupid ass down in an armchair and answered with a look of triumph on his face. "Of course, I spent the entire 30 grand on my beloved girlfriend." I asked him without changing my expression. You really have that much money saved up?" "What are you talking about? Either you're just plain stupid, or you're trying to run away from reality, Ingrid. Either way, it's not going to work. I never said I'd pay you back." "It's okay. It's not about whether or not you'll pay me back. But if you have to pay alimony on top of that 30 grand, it must be a lot." "Oh, you poor sweetheart, LOL. I can already see the moment you realize you've drained your savings, and crying in desperation because of it, LOL. "Oh, don't be so angry, Ingrid. I'll pay you the alimony, but you ain't getting that 30 grand back, LOL. We'll make it even." Roland laughs at me without realizing what it really was that I was telling him. I felt that this approach was getting us nowhere, so I decided to show him one last act of kindness by telling him the truth more directly. "Brace yourself. Here it comes. If you're so desperate to go on a trip of adultery with your beloved girlfriend, Rhonda, your mind must be in a field of flowers and puffy white clouds, thinking I would let you spend my money on your foul play. I don't suppose you can imagine that you're spending your own 30 grand? But still, credit cards are so convenient, aren't they? The fact that you can change the source from which the money can be withdrawn without changing its shape or form is really a stroke of genius. To whoever created credit cards to work this way, I salute you. It was stupid of you to think that because it was my card, it was my money. Such a shame." Roland finally started to understand what exactly was going on, and his face instantly scrunched up with rage. Then he immediately snapped and said, "You better start talking more sense, Ingrid. Or so help me, I'll make you remember this night as one filled with yelling and screaming. But I already told you what I mean. The 30 grand that you spent on your trip was your money, not mine." Wait. You didn't change the account, did you?" "I did. And those $30,000 will be taken out of the same account you used to pay for our living expenses." "Yes, indeed. The day after the incident at the tavern, I immediately changed the account of the credit card to the bank account in Roland's name. I took advantage of this particular credit card company's system that allows payments to be made to a family member's account. My husband yelled at me with the demeanor of a demon. You can't be fricking serious? What have you done to me? You're disgusting. You're a sick human being. That's when I blew up myself. Disgusting? A sick human being? I refuse to be told such bullshit by someone who went behind their wife's back and go off gallivanting with another fricking woman. How dare you think you have the right to hold me accountable? I took out my phone and replayed the recording from that evening. How did you... Roland leaned over the table to grab my phone, but I jumped away from him. Ingrid, wiretapping. That's too far. You really still can't tell which one of us is at fault here, even after hearing this? Well then, let's allow for the opinion of a third party, I said, and typed something on my phone. Within seconds, the doorbell rang. Oh, who the frick is it, at this hour? I ignored him and ran to the front door, unlocked it, and returned to the living room with the visitors. When I opened the door, Roland looked at me and the visitors, and his eyes widened in fear. Mom? Dad? Why are you... Yes, indeed. The visitors were the Finnegans, my in-laws, who already knew everything. We've listened to that recording. I don't remember raising you like this. What? This is between Ingrid and me. It's none of your damn business, guys. And what in hell's bells do you think you're talking about? A dull thud resonated throughout the living room along with Mr. Finnegan's deep, husky voice. Roland staggered back, holding his right cheek, which was now imprinted with his father-in-law's handprint. I'm going to make you repay the money you've spent in alimony, boy. Wait a minute. I just had to pay $30,000 because of her, and there's no way I can pay the alimony too. Oh, so it's Ingrid's fault you cheated on her? It's all your own fault, damn you. Pay the alimony in any way you fricking can. We won't help you for a goddamn penny, by the way. You're on your own. God damn it. Roland was a scumbag until the very end, but when he was told that much, his shoulders finally drooped as he turned pale. Ingrid, the documents, Mrs. Finnegan said from behind me. As I was aghast at my husband's ridiculous behavior, Mrs. Finnegan had opened the envelope and handed me the divorce documents. I lay them out before Roland and said, I am divorcing you as you wish. And of course, I will charge you alimony. And that was the last conversation he and I ever had. I left the house with the suitcase I had prepared and never returned. A month has passed since then, and the $30,000 was finally withdrawn from Roland's bank account. He still has a low income and almost no savings because of this incident, so he will have a hard time paying me the remaining alimony from now on. Of course, I also demanded alimony from Rhonda, his sweetheart. Because I had the recording of their conversation in the tavern, I was able to prove that she knew he was already married to another woman and had an affair regardless. As a result, Roland was quickly dumped by the woman and he lost everything, with the alimony as his only companion. After that, my ex-husband was forced to take over his parents' iron-fisted forestry business to pay the alimony. He will be forced to do manual labor from morning till night in the mountains owned by his family until he retires, if not even longer. I, on the other hand, have moved to a better condo right next to my office, and I am now working harder than ever. I can spend my days very comfortably because now I don't have to worry about anyone being stingy. From now on, I will continue to be loyal to those who have always been helpful to me, and I hope to establish more connections with more people as time goes on. Who knows? Maybe these connections will eventually lead into a new chapter in my love life. Until then, though, wish me luck.